I got sent this TikTok about this guy talking about airplanes, and I was like, hold on, wait a second. There's no way that these two guys who are super famous can lack all common sense, especially this guy. This guy is worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and apparently is self-made from what I understand. So I went on their YouTube, downloaded the full podcast, and I was hoping, okay, maybe somebody cut this thing up in the TikTok to make it look like these two guys lacked all common sense. But I was wrong. Apparently they do. Here's the full video.
And they're also outdated. Like, there is no reason why, like, your seat back, up, down when you're laying. Like, what does that have to do with anything?
I've heard it's an insurance thing. Because this is a conspiracy I've heard. I have no idea if there's any truth to this whatsoever, but it makes sense to me. The reason they teach you to, like, put your head down in a crash and stuff like that is to because if you crash headfirst in an airplane, not only are you for sure gonna die, but just to make sure, like, if you're in that position, your spine would shoot through your fucking head. Like, it would kill you instantly, right? So the theory is that they have you get in that position to make sure you die. Because the lawsuit, if you survive a commercial plane crash, is, like, ridiculous.
That's a wild.
It makes sense to me. I get everything's run by money, dude.
Okay, first let's talk about this guy. This guy's name is David. He owns Barstool Sports. The guy has made all kinds of crazy deals. He has a bunch of different media companies. The guy's worth tons of money. So it surprises me when people who are really wealthy and are able to put together big business deals lack common sense. The reason your seat needs to be upright for takeoff and landing is because, let's say you're sitting in the aisle here and you recline your seat back. And then as the plane is getting ready for takeoff, there's a problem, there's an explosion, and now there's a fire. And now everybody has to get off the plane. The problem isn't for the guy who reclined his seat. The problem is for the guy in the row behind you. You've now reduced his speed that he can get off of the plane because your seat's in the way. And I know some of you are going to say, oh, those seats barely recline, it wouldn't make a difference. And I know they'd barely go back. It depends on what kind of plane you're on. However, regardless of the situation, we have people who are, let's call them fluffy. And fluffy people are going to have a tight squeeze no matter what it is. And if there's a seat that's reclined back and they can't get off, that's going to be a problem. Now, as for this guy, Matt, he's obviously getting his information from the same site where this lady got her information from.
When you're in this position, your back is gonna break, including your spine, and you're gonna die immediately.
And I already made a video about that, which got almost 10 million views. But Matt obviously wasn't one of them. So Matt, at your level of fame, I'm sure you have a lawyer somewhere on your team. So ask them, in the event that you're on a plane and that plane crashed, if your family would be able to sue that airline. Because that literally happens all the time. Otherwise, that means airlines, when they messed up, would just make sure they messed up enough to kill you. And if they didn't kill you, that means if they skidded off the runway and there was a bunch of people injured, they would give pilots guns so we could just go back there and shoot all the people that were, like, kind of maimed but not really dead, because we don't want any lawsuits. That's essentially what you're saying. Or maybe when Sully made the announcement to the cabin crew to prepare for a crash landing.
This is the captain. Brace for impact.
He wasn't trying to save anybody's lives. He was more just curious, like, how many spines are going to be in the aisle as soon as we land? If you listen into the audio in that movie, in the background, you can hear the flight attendants screaming,
"Brace, brace, brace! Heads down, stay down!"
I don't know if that's the command they used in real life, but that's what they're saying in the background of that movie. And the reason they're saying to keep your head down is because in a crash, there's going to be projectiles flying all over the plane. And if one of those projectiles were to fly and hit you in the head, that would definitely kill you. So by bracing against the seat in front of you, it stops from your face getting slammed into that seat. And since planes don't have airbags, that removes another way that you can be injured. And if you're watching this thing and, oh, Kelsey, this isn't fair, this guy Matt, he doesn't know about this, and you go through pilot training so they teach you all these things. No, pilots don't learn any of this stuff. It's just common sense. My job as a pilot, in the event that there's an emergency that we have to crash land somewhere, it's just to safely get the plane down in the safest possible place. That is not for any other reason other than I also don't want to die. So I'm going to pick a place that I think, hey, that's going to be the best likelihood of surviving, a field or whatever it is. I think that's the best chance that we have for surviving, and so we're going to go over there and we're going to land there. The flight attendants are the ones that are in the back of the plane, and their main responsibility in that event is to safely get you off the plane. So next time you get on a plane, be nice to your flight attendant. Otherwise, if they're really petty, they might just leave you catching on fire. Or you can go to the same media source that Matt and this girl went to, and you can put your feet up in the seat in front of you, and then let your face smash into your knees and have your teeth go flying into the back of your throat, your legs all broken, and then you can scream at the flight attendant, "Help me get off this plane, my legs don't work and my face is all mangled up." That's your other option if you want to take Matt and this girl's theory, which is keep your head up as much as you can so your spine doesn't go shooting out the back of your head. The best advice that I can give you in any situation on any time that you're on a plane is just listen to your flight crew and listen to your cabin crew. The cabin crew is trained and they go through recurrent training all the time of the safest way to get people off the plane. They're the most comfortable that back there as far as working the slides and getting people off this plane safely. So listen to them. Listen to your pilots, and don't listen to people on TikTok or social media, regardless of how famous they are or how much money they have, because clearly they are lacking in common sense. Now, the one thing in this video that I did find kind of funny was this girl's response to spines coming out the back of your head.
But just to make sure, like if you're in that position, your spine would shoot through your fucking head. Like it would kill you instantly, right? So
I'm not a doctor or a medical examiner who's the guy who sees dead people and explains how they died. But I'm pretty sure if you ask one of them how many times they see accidents where spines went shooting out the back of people's heads and that was the cause of death, I would guess it's probably pretty low. So don't listen to this guy.
If you're scared of flying, don't watch this video. Here are some terrifying things I've learned as a flight attendant that have actually made my fear of flying even worse. Number one, you know those oxygen masks that are right above your seats? Yeah, those only have 12 minutes of oxygen in them. And as if that wasn't terrifying enough, I've talked to the maintenance people and they even say that those things have never been checked, so who even knows how good that oxygen even is in that tank? Speaking of maintenance, I don't think you guys want to know how many things are broken on an airplane that maintenance will literally defer for the next flight or the next time they're in their maintenance hub. AKA, if they tell you the reason that your flight is delayed is because they need to fix something really quick on the flight, they're probably not fixing it. They most likely got a random maintenance guy to come in and sign off on it to say that they could still fly the plane. I can personally testify this after they made us fly a plane with a broken slide on it. You know those blow-up slides that are supposed to inflate during an emergency crash? Yeah, it was broken and we still had to fly a plane. Not to worry, we still made it on the ground safely, but to this day, I really don't know if that slide was ever fixed or not.
I guess this girl's a flight attendant. I don't really have any way to verify that. She has millions of followers, and then she's spreading this type of stuff, which really irritates me because she's supposed to be a professional in her industry, and clearly she's using the same tactic that the media companies use, which is to sensationalize things and take a fact and then spin it in a way to make it sound scary, because that's what gets views. If you take something that involves people dying and something that's really crazy, that will get you attention. And that works on social media, just like regular media, so that's her strategy. Let's look at this thing right here where she talks about the oxygen masks and how they're never checked.
I've talked to the maintenance people and they even say that those things have never been checked.
I don't know how often they get checked. That's something that maintenance does, but here's the thing you need to know. Everything on the plane has some type of thing that needs to be checked at a certain point. They have different levels of inspections, and there's some inspections where the whole plane gets literally torn apart and put back together again and made sure that everything is really safe. And to show how little she knows about it, she thinks that there's actually oxygen tanks that are up there.
So who even knows how good that oxygen even is in that tank?
It's not oxygen tanks throughout that entire plane. That would be, one, very heavy, and two, adds an additional risk. In the event there's a fire, now you have all these oxygen tanks spread throughout the plane, so that wouldn't be really safe. What it is actually a bunch of chemicals that are up there. That's why when they say when it comes down, you have to give it a tug, and you tug it, and that releases this pin in order to get this oxygen compound from the chemicals. I don't know how it works. I'm not a scientist, but that will give you oxygen. Now, that will give you 15, 18 minutes of oxygen, and she's making it sound like that's some crazy small amount of time and you would never be able to survive it. But the only time that you would ever have your oxygen mask drop out is if the plane had a rapid depressurization of some kind. So anytime the pressurization of the aircraft were to get really high and there was no pressurization and you wouldn't have oxygen, the oxygen mask will automatically drop. The pilots are able to make it go, but the system is designed that if the pressure gets too high of an altitude, that automatically drops. And then what happens is the pilots get on a race to get to 10,000 feet or the lowest safe altitude, which usually is going to be 10,000, but there might be a few places it will be 12 or 14, which you would still be able to breathe. Now, I can assure you that we're going to be getting down as quickly as possible because pilots have to wear these super annoying masks. And I should tell you that those tanks are connected to oxygen, and it's a different setup than what you see as a passenger. So we do have oxygen tanks in the front of the plane, and that is because our oxygen needs to go longer, it needs to get fumes out and a few other things. So our system is different than your system, and our mask obviously covers our eyes so we can be able to see, because it's not great flying when you can't see. Now, I'm going to give you a worst case scenario. Let's imagine your plane here is flying along at 40,000 feet, and boom, there's an explosion, and you need to get down 30,000 feet so you're able to breathe. Typically, when you're flying in a commercial plane, you're maybe 33 to 38 would be the typical range. That's the announcement that you normally hear your pilot saying. So let's just say that's the norm, but I'm giving you like a worst case scenario of 40,000, even though some planes will fly, like I can fly up a little bit higher than that, but typical 40,000, you need to get down to 10,000. So you need to lose this 30,000 feet in the, let's say, 12 minutes, like she said. Well, a normal plane, if you were trying to do a quick descent, at a minimum would be doing 5,000 feet per minute. So if you got to get 30,000 feet, that's 6 minutes. And her saying that the oxygen mask will only last for 12 minutes, it means it's double the amount of time. And what I've heard, and I've never tried it before, but it's like 15 to 18 minutes. But here's the other thing that you need to know. If you don't get that mask on because you're freaked out, because you've been watching Girls Like Her or listening to Matt and freaked out because, oh my gosh, here's the explosion and now this is when I die. If you were to do that after, let's say, 10 seconds or 15 seconds, is going to depend on the altitude that you're at, you will just lose useful consciousness and then you'll pass out. But your plane's still going to be descending at that same speed, 5 to probably 10,000 feet a minute, because we're going to be going down as quickly and as safely as we possibly can to get down to 10,000 feet. So if you forget to put your mask on, or you freak out, have a panic attack, and don't put your mask on, it's not a big deal. Your body's going to keep breathing for the most of you. Your body's going to keep breathing until you get to 10,000 feet, and then you will wake up and be like, oh my gosh, what happened? There have been cases where pilots have had this rapid depressurization. They semi-lose consciousness. They hit a state of euphoria where you think everything's going to be okay, even though you're in a lot of danger. There have been cases, real life cases of that happening. I've talked about it in some of the videos. And those pilots, as soon as they got below probably 13, 14,000 feet or so, they came back to normal. So don't think that if you have that situation, the mask comes down, that you're in any danger. The pilots we're trained to get our mask on and get down as quickly and as safely as possible to an altitude where you're going to be able to breathe fine. So even in the scenario that we went down super slow, and even in the scenario where it was 12 minutes, you would still be fine. But I guess she forgot to mention that when she mentioned the 12 minutes. Now, as for this part,
AKA, if they tell you the reason that your flight is delayed is because they need to fix something really quick on the flight, they're probably not fixing it. They most likely got a random maintenance guy to come in and sign off on it to say that they could still fly the plane.
She's right. Sometimes we fly the plane with broken things on them. But there's a lot of redundancies in airplanes. So there might be a case, let's say, that you have 4 engine starters and one of them is broken. So now you have 3 engine starters. Okay, great. So you have a redundancy on one of the engines. So, okay, not a big deal. You're good to go. That's an example of something being broken and the plane still flying. And the reason is because that plane may be in a place where they don't have one of those igniters to fix the engine starter. I don't know. They're just coming up with an example. So the plane will fly back to a maintenance base. On the way, they'll have some people get that thing there. The plane will land and they'll fix that thing. However, if there is something that the pilots seem that, hey, this isn't safe, then we're not going to fly. They don't pay us enough to take a plane up if we think that there's any risk of us dying. So regardless of what that list says, that says, hey, you don't need any of these things on it. If there is a situation that I see, okay, hey, these 4 different things are broken and I don't feel safe to go fly because I'm worried about X, Y, or Z. If that were to happen, then I can call up the airline and say, hey, I'm not going to take the plane. It's not safe. And this is my reason behind it. And that is the final answer. There is no way to force the pilots to do it. So this thing about flying with broken stuff is true, but there isn't just like, oh, there's part of this wing is missing and this engine seems like it will probably quit. Go fly the plane anyways. Think of it like this. When you brought your car in to get maintenance checked, a lot of times the mechanic will come in and you're sitting in there and say, hey, this, and this is broken. You had no idea. You've been driving around for months with some broken piece of your car and you thought, oh, I thought this car was running fine. It's the exact same thing. The car is going to have ways that it's going to continue to operate even though something isn't working perfectly. It's the same thing on a plane, except every time we get into our plane, the pilots and usually the mechanics look it over very carefully. Most of the time when you get in your car, you just jump in your car and drive. So we catch things as soon as something's a little bit broken, we see it right away. It gets written in this logbook. That logbook gets signed off by a mechanic, and the mechanic has a responsibility. If they were to send this plane off and there was something wrong, they sent the plane off knowing, hey, this thing is broken and that there's a risk of these people dying, he's at risk of obviously losing his license, going to jail. There's massive penalties for that. And the pilots aren't going to go out knowingly fly thinking, oh, we got this broken thing. That would never happen. And then she mentions this thing about the slide being broken and she doesn't even know that it ever got fixed.
You know those blow-up slides that are supposed to inflate during an emergency crash? Yeah, it was broken and we still had to fly a plane. Not to worry, we still made it on the ground safely, but to this day, I really don't know if that slide was ever fixed or not.
My guess is that plane, when they flew it, was probably a ferry flight, meaning there was something that was broken on there, and so the airline said to the crew, hey, we're going to reposition you back to a certain spot, so another crew will take the plane tomorrow, and the maintenance people there will fix it. Because they're not going to put people on a plane with a door that doesn't work in order for the slide to be able to safely be deployed. But the crew, they will put, let's say, 4 people or 6 people on that plane, and everybody will know that one slide on the left, don't go to that one, go to the one on the right. And you can safely get 6 people off the plane off of one slide. But you're not going to put a bunch of people on there because now you're on a time crunch as far as getting these people safely off of the plane. So they're not going to fly people on a plane where the slide is broken. But again, that was forgotten to be mentioned. So my guess is that was a ferry flight. I don't know that to be the case, but that's typically what happens. There have been times where I've flown planes where there's something like that that's broken, and the airline will just say, hey, you and the crew, you guys are going to take this plane and we'll fix this thing over there. No big deal. You might watch videos when I do things like this and you can tell that I'm irritated by it. And you might think that's because I want to protect my job and my livelihood. So I'll say whatever I can in order to make the general public feel safe about getting on a plane. Here's the problem. The majority of the planes I fly are cargo planes like this one. And when I do fly passengers, they're usually professional sports teams or the military, and they're getting on the plane whether they want to or not. So it doesn't really matter to me if you want to never get on a plane again. What matters and what irritates me is when people who either are scaring you on purpose, like she is, or people that don't really know what they're talking about and clearly lack common sense, like Matt and surprisingly Dave. That irritates me because you don't know what you're talking about, and instead of just taking 10 seconds and Googling, why would you have to put your seat up in the takeoff and landing, you get on there and say like, yeah, it's stupid. They don't need that anymore. And it doesn't make any sense to me. So break open that wallet, spend the $39, get onto a flight, watch a bunch of grown men fight like children. Or don't. I really don't care. I look forward to hearing from you. Until then, keep the blue side up.